We got some slow posts, so we'll give them a minute or two.
Some pizza and donuts.
We're not all about the help here necessarily.
Speaking my language.
Yeah. Yeah, guys, what you'll see is there's little wired mics over there around each table, but feel free to sit anywhere. Don't be afraid to sit in front. And we'll get started. We'll start with this kind of stuff up here.
Put myself away from the microphone.
Right? Well, no, we're going to encourage any questions.
No,
How are we doing on the sound quality for?
It's actually sounding pretty good.
Okay.
Everyone's in here. We don't have to worry.
Yeah. Yeah. I can go find her.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I can hit worse.
We've almost got it. Well, I just want to say hi and thanks, guys. My name is Lindsay Valachi, and I'm CEO of SafeArbor. We're sponsoring this event with Axel and Carrara and Connect Hospitality and SCBA. And so we're really excited to have you all here and have a great panel conversation around how technology and cannabis are fused together in this modern industry. So we'll just get right to it and kind of introduce our panel and allow them to speak for a few minutes around their specialities and how they see progressivism in the cannabis industry moving forward alongside technology. So we're starting with Michael here, who's the Chief Innovation Officer with the City of Las Vegas. He's really been a vanguard in terms of moving forward innovation, a big advocate here for the IIC. We can talk a little bit about that, in which Mart and SafeArbor have been really blessed to be able to have a place here. And so you can speak a little bit about your role with the City of Las Vegas and how you see innovation and technology kind of taking shape in the valley here.
Great. So thank you very much. I appreciate all of you for being here. This is one of 2 innovation centers in the City of Las Vegas. The City of Las Vegas is really dedicated towards helping cultivate new businesses, whether they be technology, medical, or anywhere in between. This facility and the other facility like it, we bring together, try to have collisions where we bring different, this facility holds, or houses 10 companies in varying types of technologies or disciplines. The second facility, much like this one, will house another array of companies. But the goal is really for Las Vegas to be open, to embrace new businesses, provide opportunity, and partner with the great leaders that are up here, as well as with all the other firms that call Las Vegas home. Really trying to help Nevada take that next leap in technology and being seen not only as the technology, not only as I've already called the technology capital, not only as the entertainment capital, but also a technology and new business capital for the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Next we've got Jackie. This is pretty good to call you Jackie instead of Jackie. Yeah, please. Okay. Wonderful. From Carrara.io, and you're here to discuss the opportunities and challenges that kind of come from the customer conversion and retention around cannabis retail operators. Jackie's a real leader in a new way to kind of think about retail operations and the point of sale system. Their e-com can sit on top of any point of sale system. And so I'd love to hear you kind of talk a little bit about what you do and how you see the sort of industry moving forward with the technology that you're developing.
For sure. Quickly before I do that, how many people here actually work in the cannabis space? And how many people here are working, are interested in it, or are working for more of the government or client side of things? Cool, that's super helpful for me. My name is Jacqueline Morck. I'm the COO of Cannect. My co-founder and I created Cannect. It is meant for retail operators in the cannabis industry. And the real focus is on what we believe is sort of the next wave of cannabis technology. The first, I guess now about 10 years, depending on the states you're in, of cannabis technology has really been focused on compliance. So everything that's come in, since it's a specialized industry, has been hyper-focused. We've seen technology come out of big pharma, agriculture, all of these different industries to come in and to serve. And now we're entering what is I'm considering sort of the second wave of technology. So depending on the state that's legal and how saturated or mature the market is, we're starting to see more competition. We're starting to see, people focusing on how they're going to build brand reputation and what the market's going to look like for sustainability of an operation within the space. Where the space is going to go in terms of if we're going to see a lot of independent mom and pop shops, if we're going to see franchises, if we're going to see big multi-state operators come in and take over, a lot of these things are sort of TBD as we sort of discover the space. But what we do know is that we are in an incredibly unique industry in terms of the customer expectation for the retail experience. And the reason it's so unique is that you have a specialized industry that has the compliance of, say, pharma, right? That typically you have to go and talk to a doctor, get a prescription, deal with a pharmacy. You don't really have an expectation around the user experience or being able to acquire what you need in those spaces. But in this space, since it is becoming a free market in terms of having retailers similar to like a liquor store experience, there is an expectation from the customer's perspective that they can have a retail experience that is going to be similar, if not better and more cool, because cannabis is cool, right? As they have shopping at their shopping online, big box retailers, or engaging in some of their like cooler regional operators. And so because of that, we're starting to see a change in a demand in what is going to be seen in the customer experience. And I think that that is going to dictate the future landscape of opportunity that's really there, regardless of the size of your operation. And so quickly, I wanted to just kind of go over what we've seen as some of the limitations and opportunities that I think will be really nice to help kind of frame some of the conversations around people that are working in or interested in cannabis. Some of the limitations that we see are because it's not federally legal. There's a lot of marketing limitations. So how do these retailers that are technically regional businesses, like local businesses, get the word out there about who they are and be able to create customer acquisition and retain those customers? And right now, because of the high demand and compliance in the way that the transactions are done in a dispensary or the way that you have to pay via cash, there's very limited banks that are going to support these dispensaries. It's really difficult to create like a really sinuous customer experience, right? And so the limitations around that mean it's difficult to advertise, it's difficult to market. Once you get customers, you can't even send them text messages easily, right? Because it's technically illegal. It's difficult to be able to make payments and retention really easy. And same thing there is that because of the way all of the technology has come and focused on compliance, all of the technology is very poorly integrated when it comes to customer data, making it really sort of complex for a retail operator to be able to manage their customer base and retain those customers. The good news is that we have a lot of really wonderful examples in other industries of how a retail experience could be, and it really sort of demonstrates what we can see as the future landscape of cannabis technology in the customer experience. And what we're starting to see is the big opportunities. I think the biggest opportunity, hands down, is starting to bridge the gap between the in-store and e-commerce experience that we're seeing with the stores. And COVID has just accelerated that to an extent that I don't think anyone could predict, right? Our company does retail technology and fully integrated application for dispensaries, and we had literally just launched the ability for dispensaries to do delivery 1 month before COVID hit. And the dispensaries that were using our technology were the only dispensaries that were open when COVID hit for the first month until everyone could figure out like what to do. And even then being able to handle those orders. And that is the type of thing that is completely changing the landscape. And the opportunities now are being able to, instead of catching up to other retail industries, the opportunity to be at the forefront. We're starting to see express pickup, curbside, delivery, drive-throughs are coming soon to Las Vegas, and then lockers, which Mart is going to talk about, being able to pick up your things on demand. And these types of things are things that we're just starting to see in the customer experience. Also giving retailers the opportunity to have customized experiences for retention with mobile applications. You're going to start seeing things. Apple just legalized the ability to push mobile applications, including an e-commerce experience in July. Our company is going to be the very first to push apps to market for dispensaries, which is incredibly exciting. And thank you. And that experience is, like, in my opinion, I think this Nevada is the most exciting place for all of this to happen, because I'm from Silicon Valley, I moved here, and Nevada is, in my opinion, the most sophisticated and the most advanced market in cannabis. And I think that's because of the compliance and the understanding that the city has from gambling, from the liquor industry, the entertainment industry, and really being able to provide that safety framework so that companies like ours can start sort of playing in a really nice, safe sandbox and using that as a stepping stone for innovation to showcase what the rest of the country and then the rest of the world can do. So I'm super excited about this, and I am happy to answer any questions around that later.
So, can you say, is it carrot like the vegetable or carrot
Yeah,
like
carrot like the
diamonds?
vegetable.
Okay.
Yeah, carrot like the vegetable. It can give you information. We just launched into market in June. We've been working with a set few dispensaries in the state of Nevada over the last 2 years, so I'm happy to give you information around that. And anyone would like to see the very first cannabis mobile app in the App Store after, let me know and I will showcase it on my phone because it's pretty exciting.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. Thank you. Yes, great. I know I have a lot of questions for you coming up. But
Yeah.
Next up is Mart, CEO of SafeArbor, which makes digital lockers for storing and processing in complex regulatory spaces, all that sensitive cargo that we're seeing like cannabis. So Mart is a lifelong entrepreneur, and she's actually a vanguard in the cannabis industry because in the ancillary space, after co-founding SafeArbor, she has realized that there is a lack of, people weren't even thinking along the lines of how to both physically protect and digitally protect product. And so she's really been developing this alongside the manufacturing partner, American Locker, in North Las Vegas. So they have companies here. So we'd love to hear more about what you think about the opportunities and challenges within that space.
Thanks. Lindsay is a co-founder, so we'll give her credit for this company as well. And I'll echo a lot of what Jacqueline was talking about. We formed this company in Northern California in 2018, where we saw the cannabis industry really taking off. In California, a lot of operators, as it scaled from 215 to adult use, but not having access to scale technology that we saw in big box retail, in distribution, in transport, and in oversight. And so that led us to formulate ideas around how we could bring this technology to the cannabis industry, and it required quite a bit of software re-engineering to handle compliance, chain of custody for compliant goods, and that's why we moved here to Las Vegas. So we've relocated our firm here in partnership with, as Lindsay mentioned, American Locker, which one is a rare, fully scaled factory in North Las Vegas that makes these kind of electronic locker systems in facilities and retail locations that you all are familiar with, residential for mail and asset parcel pickup, or for grocery buy online pickup in store, or outside 7-Eleven or Whole Foods. So, like Jackie said, we're really dedicated to bringing this cannabis 2.0, 3.0 experience, and looking at the distribution of this really highly contentious but very profitable, not only for operators, but for the states that can appreciate their excess tax when they're able to innovate towards new customer acquisition strategies. So when we started this company in California, we were really inspired by a new license type that was created there called non-storefront retail. This is like a dispensary license, but instead of a brick and mortar store where a customer go in, it would be a warehouse that housed hundreds of cars and did 1,500 deliveries a day in Oakland. The non-storefront retail license category was driven by and designed around a tech stack. And so we're really, really excited here in Nevada that the Assembly Bill has passed for consumption. We see this as a really exciting time for Nevada to get on the map as this kind of regulation is rolling out across the East Coast in densely populated population centers. We have a chance here with the language in the bill and the coming license applications and distribution of them to really change the way that consumption lounges are put into place across the country. And especially Vegas, where there's so many tourists, 60 million a year coming through, this is an opportunity to serve them all an example that they can take back home. So Lindsay and I, as a startup, there are some challenges we face bringing new technology to a regulated environment where laws are set and not so easily changed. Some of the challenges we faced most were in garnering partnerships, because until we are doing live transactions on a cannabis platform, we don't have that traction that we would need to leverage partnerships. We're really excited the opportunity to be working with local firms like Jackie's to be able to create a new type of software service here in Vegas and then scale it not only through the lounge bill here, but beyond. So it's really been a chicken and egg for us. We went through years of that, being able to demonstrate this technology, even though it's really familiar outside sector, and probably all of you have interacted with an electronic locker. It is a disruption to the way that retail spaces and real estate investment trusts have really monetized, and the acquisition landscape that is in place for cannabis operators at this point could be optimized not only for operators, for customers, for the entire industry and the tax base that is generated. So those are some challenges we found as we were trying to get our foot in the door. It took a bit longer than we thought, mostly because of a state-by-state regulatory landscape where the compliance codification we did for California or a code change created a lot of engineering that we would need to modify for applications in Nevada. As we look forward to the future of a federal landscape, it's going to be how these agile software platforms are able to both be constantly alerted of regulatory changes and looking forward to how they can streamline those workflows so that when the changes are made, we can predict them and already have a set solution in place. So, again, just to sum up, we were given some of our seed money in support of by a program here with the City of Las Vegas. We have our office here at Innovate Vegas in the International Innovation Center. It's a great program that this city has that is unique. I've lived in San Francisco and New York for many years, and this is a rare opportunity and something I think that a lot more companies can get involved with and drive an innovation hub here downtown Las Vegas.
Thank you. And actually, that's pretty apropos because that leads into our next guest, Joe Brezny, who's Director of Political Operations for Carrara, Nevada. And they're a full-service government relations firm, and he is pretty much a rainmaker within Carrara, I would say, if I can say that. They effectively impact northern and southern Nevadas. They work all over the state to advance kind of cannabis equality among other initiatives. I think that their ethos, their actions are kind of born out of the idea that across the aisle working relationships is the way to, with key legislators and decision makers, is the way to be able to sort of propel political motions forward. So we'd love to hear you talk, Joe, having been in this space for so long, and Nevada, born and bred, how you see this as moving forward in terms of the cannabis space and as applicable to other industries that might be sort of crossover now.
Thank you for having me. So I found that my presentations are better for the audience if I use a timer and notes. So I'm going to notes. That way I stay on topic and don't go over. So I think we're about to enter a golden age in Nevada cannabis. And it's been a long road. We actually are one of the early states to pass this. The constitutional amendment went through before I moved here in 2001, and so it had to pass in 2 ballot initiatives. I believe it was 98 and 2000. And then I went to work at the legislature when I moved here, and I worked for, I was the Republican Senate Caucus Director, and we had the majority in the state Senate, and we spent the next 10 years doing nothing on marijuana. Tick Segerblum, he's a county commissioner now. He was an assemblyman, then he was a senator. He dropped a bill every single session. But even then, the bills were for full legalization. They were for recreational. They weren't for regulating the medical market. So we finally figured out the path to everything else would be regulating the medical market. So there was, that bill went through in 2013. And then by the time they wrote the regs, about a year and a half later, we had those opening up. And they were open in time so that when the 2016 ballot initiative was running, I was the spokesperson for that initiative, we were able to show people that the argument against us, the marijuana boogeyman, wasn't true. And so we won, and we thought we were entering the golden age. And we had an initial round of licenses for rec go to our medical operators, and then there was a second round of licensing. And this was where the fairy tale ended, because a smaller number of licensees got a bigger number of licenses. You had a few big winners and a lot of people who lost. And so then we entered the lawsuit phase of Nevada marijuana history, which I know a bunch of lawyers that paid for their kids' college. But it appears that that's finally ending. And it appears that that's finally ending, which is wonderful, because we were a united industry before. That caused some pretty deep fractures, but the industry's coming back together, and that is ending right as the consumption lounge bill passed. Scott Rutledge was the campaign manager for us on question 2. He ran the day-to-day operations. That was his baby at the legislature. He ran that with the Chamber of Cannabis, and having consumption lounges fixes a multitude of problems for us. Not smallest on the list is the fact that gaming is our lifeblood, and we need to respect the gaming industry here, and they don't want to have every single parking structure smelling like a consumption lounge every evening. And right now, I mean, if you want to find someone to pinch for their bag, go to a parking structure at like 7 o'clock at night, and there's 2 or 3 groups smoking weed out there, because there's nowhere for them to go. And so that's going to fix that problem. That's not good. It's not good when we have people smoking marijuana willy-nilly all over the place. And so that will fix that problem. But the larger thing that comes from that is every time we make a regulatory move, we see all these dominoes fall that we didn't even expect. And so if you think about what Vegas is based on, it's based on experiences. And so now, if you want to have a bachelor party and you are a marijuana consumer and not a drinker, you actually have an option of someplace you can book to do that. In March Madness, these folks are going to pay for most of their overhead for the year, because they're going to be able to have people in there watching the games. And when you put sports and marijuana in the same place legally, you are going to make a bunch of money. And so that's part of this golden age that's coming, where the industry is getting along together, and they're not suing each other as much, just like a normal amount. And we've got consumption lounges coming, and I think the bill was balanced, and there were some compromises made, and we're going to really become a nationwide leader for that. And so that's why I think marijuana is really entering its golden age in Nevada. And then I also think that there's another disruption on the horizon. We've been saying for like 12 years that we were 3 years away from action in Washington at the federal level. I truly believe we're still around 3 years. I don't think it's going to be super fast, but I think it will be within President Biden's first term. And I think that when that happens, when you have one specific permissible issue, interstate transport, I think that is going to be when you see the next big disruption. And the reason is because smart operators, smart people, like when Marta's company makes a big splash and they can hire guys like me to go around to all of the southern states and convince them that they should be dispensary-only states. Because if you look at the statistics, most of the complaints from non-fans of marijuana, people who hate the industry, they're complaints about odor around the cultivation sites. And you also have enough of a fall crop in Oregon and Northern California, you could quite literally supply the entire country with marijuana that sounds like it's from someplace way cooler than Arkansas. And so I think that once you see that interstate transport, then you're going to see companies, 5 minutes and 2 seconds, I'll wrap up. So, but I think you're going to see companies like Marta's really just exploding, and I think you're going to see an opportunity for people like candy makers. The reason that edibles are still made by hand is that if you took a mothballed chocolate making machine that's sitting in a factory somewhere, that's sitting in the corner, it's in the corner because it only makes 800 units a minute, and it's not fast enough for normal candy. Well, our edibles are made like in hours. Like the overhead on that is insane. But we had a candy maker come to one of my operators 5 years ago, and we told him, if we ran your machine for 45 minutes, we would supply the Nevada medical market for a year. And now, if we ran it for 2 days, we would supply the medical or the recreational market in Nevada for a year. But once you have a machine that's dialed in for automation of edibles, you're essentially going to drop the price of those edibles to the price of the extract. And right now it's inflated because it's so labor intensive. And so that next disruption is going to come when the market expands, because you can have supply states like Nevada, Oregon, California, and then you're going to have consumer states like the Deep South. And so I think that we're entering a golden age of marijuana for Nevada, and I think we're about to see another disruption on the federal level.
Thank you.
Well, I got a lot of questions from that too. Okay, who's next? Steve? You there? Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
So Assemblyman Steve Yeager, we're honored to have you here from the Nevada State Legislature to discuss the opportunities and challenges around 341, because you have really been not only an exemplary public servant, but someone who really represents the best in progressing the legal cannabis agenda across the state by uniquely bringing together these diverse groups, having people kind of come together and advocate and have a voice in defining that legislation. All up and down the supply chain, but specifically with regard to consumption right now. So we'd love to have you talk a little bit about that and how that journey has been and what that's looking like for the future.
Great, yeah, thank you. So I'm Steve Yeager. I serve in the Nevada Legislature. I represent a district in Southwest Las Vegas. And so thanks for having me. I do a lot of panels with other legislators, and I like other legislators, but it's nice to do a panel with some normal people. Appreciate being here. And thank you to all of you who have chosen to live here and to bring your businesses to Nevada. I'm really encouraged to hear the good things about the state, because I think we try to do things the right way. We try to have the welcome mat, and so I think we're accomplishing that. Before I talk a little bit about the bill, I just want to give you just a quick background of why I even care about this issue. When I first moved here, I became a public defender, and I actually worked just on the other side of this building, is where the Clark County Public Defender's Office is. And that was about 2009 time frame. And as Joe said, we had medical marijuana was in our Constitution as legally permissible, but there was nowhere for anybody to get it. And I got really tired of representing people who were arrested for having very small amounts of marijuana, which we now call cannabis, because everything evolves. But I just saw an increasing number of minorities who were arrested. It was never people that looked like me. And so, that sort of got the wheels turning in my mind, and I was fortunate enough to lobby up at the legislature for the Public Defender's Office in 2013, when finally the Godfather, Tick Sagerbloom, working with then Senator Mark Hutchison, was able to get medical dispensaries. And then finally in 2016, as Joe mentioned with the ballot initiative, we had our voters vote for recreational. As Joe mentioned, we had kind of a problem there because the recreational ballot initiative did not allow consumption in public. That was a strategic decision that was made to run it that way, and I can't argue with that because it passed, and it didn't pass really by all that much when you look at it. But anyway, so we have this industry that's flourishing, and we have a big problem though, right? And this should be pretty obvious. We've got 40 to 60 million people coming to Las Vegas, and what do they want to do? A lot of them want to go to dispensaries because they don't have the ability to do that in their home state. And I had heard at one point from Rideshare that one of the dispensaries closest to the Strip was the #1 requested destination of the year for Rideshare from the Las Vegas Strip. So they go and they get this product, but then they're sort of disappointed to learn that there's nowhere they can consume it because the casinos don't want it in their properties. And in fact, they've been given guidance that they're not allowed to have it in their properties. So what you got is exactly what Joe said, which is the parking lot smoking the parking garage, or if you walk down the Las Vegas Strip, you sort of smell it everywhere. But it's not just a tourist problem, it's a local problem too. People that live in subsidized Section 8 housing, they cannot smoke at home. There are a lot of people that just don't want to partake in their house, right? And there's like nowhere for them to go, really. So we've been working on this bill for a while, and I brought it with me. It's a pretty thick bill, and as Joe said, my name might be on it, but a lot of other people worked really hard on it and getting it across the finish line. So we were able to finally do this bill this session. We had the right makeup of the legislature. We had the right governor in office. And, I had some conversations with the governor. It wasn't necessarily an easy sell, but we got there. We were able to get this passed. It did require bipartisan support because there's a fee component. You have to pay for one of these licenses. And when you put that in a bill, that means you need a 2/3 vote. So we got there by the skin of our teeth at the assembly. I think we had 1 vote to spare. But so we have this bill, and so what does it mean for the state? I, for one, am just really excited about what this could look like for a lot of reasons. And so I'll just kind of hit the highlights of the bill and why I think it's really, really great. So number one, if you are an existing dispensary owner, you can have a lounge if you want one. You have to pay to have it, but you can have it co-located. You only get one, so if you have like 5 dispensaries around town, you got to pick your prime location. So that was obviously how we got the existing industry to be okay with the bill, but there's opportunities aside from that. So another part of this bill is the independent consumption lounge. So this is going to be for people that don't have a dispensary license, and they can open up an independent lounge. There is a limited number at the beginning, which I believe will increase in the future. And so a lot of people ask me, well, what is this going to look like? Is this just going to be a smoking lounge? And the really cool part is, I don't know. I think it's going to look really awesome, right? Because whatever concept you can dream of, I think you can do here. We talked about sports, sports lounges. I think comedy clubs would be great. That's probably the only place for anyone to laugh at my jokes. If you're into cannabis, but I mean, you could have paint and Pinot with wine. You could have paint and pot. I mean, whatever the concept is, I think you're going to want to fit it into where your location is, whether it's by the strip or if you're out in the community, maybe you want high-end infused cannabis food. I think there'd be a huge market for that in places in the state. So all of this is coming. When is it coming? Well, right now the Cannabis Compliance Board is coming in with all the rules in the process. So I'm very hopeful that first quarter of next year into second quarter of next year, we'll see some of these places open. Probably the ones attached to dispensaries will open quicker. If you think about like Planet 13, they kind of have the space ready to go, right? They saw this a while ago. So these are coming, and here's why I think it's exciting. We sort of mentioned it. I mean, one, it's going to solve some of these problems, these social ills that we have. And I get complaints sometimes, a lot of times about the strip and the smell. But more exciting than that is, I think this. I mean, as you know, like, Vegas is a great place. People want to come here and experience things. You're going to add this into the mix. And I think to the extent we're not already, like, we're going to be the destination, the cannabis destination. So number one, it's going to bring more people into our state, I think, for that reason. But number two, the people that come here already, we know they come from all over the world and all over the United States. So when we're talking about southern states getting on board with this, it's going to help southern tourists coming to Nevada having good experiences with cannabis and saying, well, this is different than I thought. And going back and telling their family and their friends, and hopefully that trickles down to their Congress people and their senators, because I think we have that kind of market where people are going to say, wow, this really does work. And so there's other things in the bill, but one other thing I wanted to mention, we're putting a focus on social equity. So we're trying to open up opportunities for people that haven't been in the industry before. So it's not just guys that look like me and Joe who are going to have the ownership. I mean, we're focusing on that. So I think the opportunities are there. I'm just really excited. I think this bill is a model for the rest of the country. And again, it was a lot of hard work, but we've got to do the hard work of implementing it now. And what I tell everyone is, like, this is great. It's a piece of paper, it's words, but like, it's going to take all of us to make this successful. So when we look back a year or 2 years from now, we're like, we got it right. So that's my ask of all of you is, when we're moving forward in this industry, in this space, let's make sure we get it right. We don't want any of the problems. We want this to be a beacon to the country and to the world. So I'm excited about the bill, really excited to see what comes next. And I'm hoping I get invited to a few grand openings.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. I really like what you were talking about in terms of the new opportunities and going in different directions, because I think that ties directly to Andrew, what you're doing with Connect Hospitality. You're creating these unique one-on-one experiences and sort of full spectrum of hospitality wrap the job, so that they can have crossover with social equity organizations and also business leaders to create really unique experiences. So I'd love to hear you kind of talk about that and really, how your time has been with the company and where you guys are going kind of the next few years, seeing as how once this bill is passed, where that might lead.
Yeah, so huge opportunity coming. Thank you guys for showing up at this. Steve, you kind of stole my thunder. Full concepts and whatnot, but yeah, I've got notes like everybody else, and we'll kind of go through those and see how this goes. So my name is Mieure. I am the director of operations at Cannect Hospitality. We are a fully licensed support business for the state of Nevada and cannabis companies. So we help out with concept development, throwing parties. So like tonight, the Zodiac party, we help with planning all of that and making sure they stay in compliance with all of their cannabis rules and regs for the state. And we're really excited for that. And we also do basically everything full stop hospitality. So all traditional hospitality and everything that leads into the cannabis hospitality side of things. So I work with some really great partners. One is a lawyer named Erin Sofer and Jen T. She's well known in the community here in the cannabis community. She's been fighting for cannabis hospitality as long as I can remember in the state. A little more background about myself. I actually started my cannabis career in Denver, Colorado in 2014. So I lived in Colorado for a while, learned the ropes there. We got the first municipal bill passed. It was actually an initiative called Initiative 300 to allow existing businesses to have cannabis consumption on site, and it was modeled after or for like bars if they wanted a smoking section. But they made the rules and regulations for that so strict that only 2 had opened within the first 3 years of this being passed. It was essentially a regulatory nightmare. So I couldn't move forward with that. I decided to move to Vegas because we were working with the city originally in 2017, 2018 to move their bill forward. And that got passed at the city level. The state came in and said, hey, wait, hold on a second, we're not allowing you to move forward with that. And then that brought the Chamber of Cannabis, Scott, and all of the crew to bring along the new assembly bill, which is great. But from there, I moved to Vegas and hooked up with Cannect and have been working with groups to really kind of take cannabis hospitality to the next level. We still have to look at hospitality as hospitality. Just because we're serving weed, the rules of hospitality don't go out the window. Just because cannabis is here, we still have to focus on it, and what better place to do it than Vegas? That's what we're here for. And that's what we've done for years. So I think the biggest thing to me is going to be with this new bill coming through and passing, we're going to have some of the most diverse business models I've ever had the pleasure of even being able to contact for people. I've heard things from an infused barbecue spot that has infused barbecue sauce on really good ribs. I've heard cannabis and putt-putt. We've heard full-scale nightclubs with cannabis. I don't know how that's going to work out. I've really never seen that in practice. Will people dance or will they be couch loud? I don't know. So I'm hoping to see some nightclub concepts and things that we'll work with some of our clients on. As big or as small as it can be, I mean, I've seen 5,000 square feet concepts, and I've seen 30,000 square feet whole nightclub concepts. And folks like Planet 13 and the existing dispensaries, they have a real advantage with the space that they have. Some challenges that we do see though on real estate is going to be a real big problem coming. So if you're planning on getting into these lounges at all or having one on your own, make sure you have your real estate on lock and it's within the proper zone areas. Otherwise, you're going to have a real hard fight ahead of yourselves. I think also technology integration, since obviously we're in a place that's very tech heavy. I think crypto and technology like SafeArbor and everything you guys have going on with lockers, applications like you're working on as well are going to be fantastic for getting people in and out of the lounges quickly, efficiently, and allow them to spend the type of money and the type of currency we want to spend at these locations. So we can kind of have a future forward look towards these lounges, which is really cool. So, I mean, there's endorsement deals with celebrities coming into the city, business models will allow for social equity. I think this specifically, this section, cannabis hospitality, is one of the untouched gems from the MSOs. If anybody here works for an MSO, it's cool. I also have clients that are from MSOs too. But we also want to give the little guys a shot, and having smaller operations like this give folks that have been impacted by the war on drugs got shot because the capital requirements are a lot lower on some of these things than having a full cultivation bill or something. So, I am just really super excited to get everything rolling here, and we're waiting on the regs to finalize, and once we have those a little more clearly defined, I think we can start really building out some awesome stuff, get these concepts finalized, and get everybody rolling on making Vegas what I would like to consider to be the best and most progressive cannabis bill on social consumption in the United States for that. Yeah, thanks to everybody who's involved and what they're doing.
We'd love to open it up to some questions. Anyone has one from the audience?
I want to go ahead and ask, those rags, who approves those once those are written? I know that you have groups work, you do, Steve?
Well, so the Cannabis Compliance Board is going to be the ultimate agency that approves them. And the way that they've structured it right now is they've kind of designated 4 different subgroups to make recommendations. So I'm on the public safety one, and we have Aisha Goins who walked in, who's on the social equity one. There's a public health one, and also a market stabilization. So those are recommendations, and they're going to go to the Cannabis Compliance Board. They're going to go through their process, which is going to be public workshops, public input. So there's going to be a lot of chances to input into that. And then ultimately what they're going to do is they come up with the final regulations, and the legislature has the opportunity to pull those regulations in and review them. The legislature doesn't have to do that. The Cannabis Compliance Board's in this kind of special space where they do the regulations, and then if nobody really says anything for a period of time, they become final. But I can tell you, working with Tyler Clemus, who's the executive director of the Cannabis Compliance Board, I've been really impressed with him. I think he gets this, and so I'm excited to see how this is all going to play out. But that's the delay, right? We passed the bill, but we've got to come up with all the rules about how to do it. And by the way, I think this was one of the reasons we were able to finally get this bill, because when the city was trying to do what they were going to do, we didn't have the Cannabis Compliance Board. That was something we created in 2019. So you all may remember, marijuana started with the Health and Human Services Division, and then it went to the Department of Taxation, neither of which are good places to house the regulatory agency. So we created this new agency, and we modeled it after the Gaming Control Board, smaller in scale, but I think that gave our members more comfort that we were going to have an actual agency in charge of this. And so I think that's part of the reason for the success of the bill in 21. We weren't able to do it in 17 or 19. Thanks.
Hi, I'm actually from Pennsylvania, and I was in the Pennsylvania legislature when we were working on this. And our sort of lodestar was no stigma. Like, we wanted to make sure in every context, cannabis was treated at least no worse than alcohol, right? And so, we worked hard with cannabis lounges, and it sounds great that you guys seem to have the same philosophy with, bars, nightclubs, and everything you can make place to get alcohol. You should have a similar facility to get cannabis. Hopefully the next big mega hotel will be Weed World, and you can have a whole 3,000 rooms and all like that. But I was just wondering, because Pennsylvania is a little slower, and we elect different people in Pennsylvania. But what has been the biggest source of the pushback, if any, that you've been receiving? Is it traditional bars? Is it sort of socially conservative groups? Is it like, who's fighting against all of this?
I mean, I guess I would say sort of all of the above, but at the same time, I think it was just, our legislature here only meets every other year, so we're very odd, right? We meet 120 days in every other year, and I just think it just took a while to get everyone comfortable with the concept. I think the fear was, if we do this too quickly, it's going to spiral out of control, and like I said, all our worst fears are going to come true. But I don't know that there was ever anyone really had a big issue with it. I mean, gaming was a concern only because they have federal gaming licenses and with the federal illegality, but once we're able to sort of address those concerns about distance requirements, keeping them out of gaming properties, I would say the only other people through this process that we really had that didn't like it were just people that don't like cannabis. I mean, they were people that didn't vote for the initiative, and just sort of on principle, they won't go for it.
But even some of those more conservative members would tell you, I didn't vote for it. I mean, I give them credit, they say, look, it's here, and we have a responsibility to provide a place of access. So I think the biggest impediment was just figuring out what this was gonna look like, how it was going to work, and that took a little bit of time. Because as I said, we didn't have a compliance board, and so the city of Las Vegas, I mean, God bless them, they said, we're gonna jump out front and start this ball rolling, and I think all of us went like, oh, wait a second, like, we don't know if we want the city of Las Vegas to like do it first, right? Because then you might have different municipalities with different rules, so we kind of put the brakes on it, but that got the ball rolling, and then it just took a little bit of time to get people comfortable. And it's amazing, really, how far we've come since the conversations we had in 13 around dispensaries. I mean, some of us are going to Arizona to look at the dispensaries, and everyone thought these are going to be beaded curtains and once you sort of show people, and I think that was valuable, right? And as Senator Mark said, it was fairly conservative. He led the drive on the Republican side, and once we were able to say, like, look, this is not a fly-by-night operation. Some of these places look like Apple stores, one of the nicest venues I've ever been to. So it just took some time for that comfort level to get there. So hopefully that answers the question, but I think we've turned the corner in our state, at least, where people know what's coming. And so, like I said, we just got to make sure we get it right, because we don't want to prove any of those naysayers right if we get it wrong out the gate.
I'd like to add to some of the pushbacks I've heard. Drunk driving is another big one. I was worried through listening to the subcommittee meetings that the law enforcement was going to be really heavy into opposing what we were trying to do. Honestly, the law enforcement side has been really understanding through this process, and they're really trying to understand how we can make these work. And companies like Uber and Lyft getting involved and actually trying to make an effort to allow safe driving or safe ride-share services. And even with concepting, we're thinking, are we going to make these places without parking lots on purpose? Valet only parking lot, no parking lots, so people have to get Uber and Lyft, and they don't have an option to drive away. So those are some things we're kind of baking into some of the concepts we're making as well. And I think there are a lot of fears, but there are good solutions that we can find to kind of circumvent that. Like people over consuming, there are ways to get around it. It's just how we go about doing it with sound operations and making sure that people are taking their due diligence and the operators that we have in place are good.
You mentioned that law enforcement is sort of got on board on this. There's a governance race coming up with Ian Heller and Joe Lombardo and Jacqueline on the Republican side. I'm sure that will run again. Have all three of them put position pieces out on their acceptance or projection of where we're looking to go?
I haven't seen anything from the candidates, but just speaking practically, there's, we're putting $150 million a year in the state budget. And so that's a snowball that's so big, if you try and stand in front of it, it goes stop, that snowball's just gonna run you over. Yeah. And so the only one out of that mix would be stupid enough to even try that is Dean Heller. And Dean would, I know his handlers, they'll probably tell him not to do that. You just listen to his handlers. So, and I don't think he's gonna be governor.
I'm more concerned, Lombardo seems like a pretty practical guy.
Metro's been great. They really, the big complaints that they've had all along were pretty valid. Most of, during the campaign, did they kick me in the head? Yeah, that was their job, but they were opposing us. But since then, the tone has really changed. What I hear from them, honestly, is marijuana has never been a pain in the neck for them. The pain in the neck for them is alcohol, gold, domestic violence. And that is the thing that if you can make one thing go away in a cop's life, it's not a stoner, it's alcohol, gold, domestic violence. So they kind of see you go back to their corner once we pass this. And they've been pretty good. We had to talk to them for a couple of years on consumption, but you summed it up really well. Vegas ran forward, and then everybody else was like, whoa. And that gave us, that was one instance where our 2-year goofy legislative cycle actually worked more to finish, because we had enough time to circle the wagons and get everybody a chance to say where they were, and talked through the issues, and we landed. I mean, this is a huge deal. This is a huge historic deal. It's as big as question 2 passing in the grand scheme of things. I mean, you reckon this is going to happen? This is that big.
Well, you know, he's right too. I mean, you have to credit City of Las Vegas because, you know, one of the selling points for getting this passed and talking to folks is like, if we didn't do this, our moratorium would have expired, which would have meant that every city, county, municipality would have had different rules for how these were going to work. So one of the conversations with Metro is, do you want just one set of rules to enforce, or would you like to have City of Las Vegas, the county, City of Henderson, City of North Las Vegas, Boulder City, you name it? And they said, no, we would rather have one. And I said, well, let's figure out how to do it then. So, you know, that City of Las Vegas stepping out really did, at the time, that kind of freaked us out. But in the long run, I mean, it really helped us get everyone to coalesce around one statewide bill and statewide regulations.
I will say, to piggyback on that quickly, like that impact that's happened, I think is part of the reason that we're going to see so much innovation in the way that things are brought to market as well. Because part of the reason that Las Vegas has been such an exciting, Nevada in general, an exciting market to build technology in is because there is one right way to do things here, and it's a good way. Right? And it's a better way. Like, I'm from California, I went to Silicon Valley for 2 years. It's still a hot mess up there, right? Like, and every county is looking at trying to do some things differently. Like, there's so many differences. And the fact that, like, Nevada's been able to set such a great example as other states are starting to legalize, I think the more that we can, like, really get that out there and do that is going to help companies like ours be able to bring our services to market and do it in a way that's going to be safe, reliable, integrate those things into it, integrate ways for people to pick up their product safely, to get home safely, to be able to have an experience that's going to increase the amount of comfortability that people are going to have with it. And I think that, like, I'm really excited. Like, this, to me, this panel is so exciting to have, like, technologists and, like, people from the government here on there talking about the innovation. Because I guarantee this is the only state where you're going to see both these people in one panel and actually working together and doing this. And I think that that's a really good thing, right? I feel like a lot of times people, like, that work in industry and technologies just, like, kind of try to shy away or hesitant to work with government because they feel like it's slow or they feel like it can be prohibitive. And I feel like here it's a really strong advantage that we have. And I think the more we can lean into it, the better that we're all better out of it.
Sorry, so the profitability thing as well too. They allowed us to be profitable with this bill. Every other state, you know, bring your own language. Those are just not profitable. I don't believe bring your own. I think it's a really bad structure. It's not safe. And this allows us to have our businesses and still be profitable. You know, I don't think the government overreaches too much on this to allow us to at least have our concepts moving. It's great.
Yeah, and I was gonna add, like, we've all heard of the notion of seed to sale. That's how cannabis has been regulated nationwide. A regulatory facing tracking system that tracks the movement of cannabis from cultivation through end user retail. So for the state of Nevada, the city of Las Vegas, to be including technology companies, that you can't track seed to sale without platform technology. And so it's time to involve platforms in the conversations that can help the bills roll out into the best optimization.
Yeah. I mean, my co-founder is on one of the advisory board of admissions for the newest Mike's board, and that is, to me, like, you don't see that in other states. Like, there's too much of a segment. A lot of times you don't even know each other, right? Let alone being able to actually be able to have real conversations, get actual feedback. Like, I've been really impressed from seeing the amount of actual feedback that the government has gotten from businesses and innovators in this space to understand what's needed and to really figure out how to do that in a way that's going to safely serve the people. Just applaud you guys for that.
That'd be my next campaign.
Yeah, I just want to comment that we're from Colorado and gone through lots of rulemaking processes. We're in the technology space trying to increase safety and speed, and to hear what's happening here is actually blowing my mind. It is. It's you know, being the oldest isn't necessarily the best. They're already, you know, stuck in ways that don't make any sense, that are actually destroying companies there.
I mean, that's
So-
California's problem too.
Yeah, in California, well, like you said, it's a hot mess, so California is a hot mess. But to hear this, it's so exciting. I'm involved in 2 technology companies. One that Joe founded on fast ID verification through an API, super fast, you can't scam it, and really easy and low security of PII. And the other is a intersection or disruptor of the rideshare world, where we actually work on, as a loyalty program, to give away free rides to keep everybody safe.
Yeah.
It's called Honest Rides, and we're trying to relaunch after the pandemic.
So if so for example, we have a dispensary, sorry, just sidebar.
Yeah,
but
sure,
it's really
sure.
cool. If we have a dispensary and they have a rewards program in there and they've built up rewards points, one of those things could be of redeeming a ride as opposed to a.
Exactly correct, and even more so than talking about on-premise consumption, and, you know, this is, most people get confused in Colorado about it because we really want on-premise consumption, because we're trying to help the safety boards stop impaired driving. Now you've got clashing drives, so we want alcohol, take care of alcohol and cannabis. And so if they go to a consumption location, well, they're earning free ride credits and they're getting free rides on Uber and Lyft. We're fully integrated with Uber and Lyft. So Uber and Lyft gets the money, but the consumer gets the gift. And we create with the producers and the locations, create a good synergy for marketing and safety and loyalty. So between these 2 things, I'm saying, yeah, here, you know, we're getting office here. How do we get an office?
Well, you know, like, so part of our public safety subcommittee, we invited your regulators from Colorado to speak to us, and they were great, but I said, how many places do you have? You know, they call them hospitality.
Yeah.
How many places are open?
Yeah.
They were like, well, there's like 1.5 or 1.
Yeah, 1.5, and they both went out of business.
It was concerning to me, because I'm like, well, how are you guys not open? But that being said, like, we took a lot of the public safety regulations from Colorado, changed the name. So, I think at least on the public safety side, you guys have a good framework. Now, there's something else going on that's preventing.
Well, there's even more. Joe worked on lobbying for the rulemaking to actually get digital IDs actually authorized and accepted, because it's arcanely written that 2 people have to touch and look at this.
So this is very interesting.
And you know what the number one violation in Colorado is? Underage sex. Why? There's a human involved. You know, if you use the right technology, which at 30 years of figuring out how to do this, Joe figured it out, and has a great tech stack, and it's just amazing how you can actually do it and integrate it into e-commerce POS or in machines. We're so excited about the machine.
Cannabis compliance board wants to demonstrate, like, approve this so that we can,
Yeah.
It's honestly, the double ID is the biggest barrier in retail right now for so many reasons. And like, we figured out, payments we figured out, accessibility we figured out, customer retention, we figured out all these different things, and they're coming to market and they're gonna be coming in Nevada first. But the biggest barrier is the double identity that's needed. That's stopping so much future innovation, both on the consumption and on the retail side of things.
Well, I love the way you said that, because now with adult boys, I was a little bit of a troublemaker when I was younger. So any of the systems that exist today are easily scanned. And the other component is very much around what you just said. It has to be consumer friendly, it has to be fast, and it has to meet all of the existing alcohol and color tips, right? It's very constrained what you do, and that's the critical component. So it addresses my burden.
In addition to not storing PII.
Here's what is
mind-boggling.
Required, and it's starting to get baked in the Colorado regs, is that the person doing the e-com order for delivery has to be the same recipient and it has to match.
So we handle delivery, we allow dispensaries to be able to do their own delivery in the platform. And that has been like, for us, one of the biggest barriers for truly being able to expand it. Now, because if you do it through a third-party app, it's really hard because the time frames, if you give it to like a Blackbird or whatever, the time frames for being at home will almost make it impossible for the person actually to do it.
For 7 hours.
Right.
Wait all day.
So our dispensaries do it, and they can handle the order fulfillment. They know exactly what the drivers are out, and our system texts them and says, we'll be there within the next amount of minutes so that they can be home, which solves a big portion of the problem. And yet, I run this application and still myself when we order delivery, like a third of the time instead of just stopping by the dispensary because I don't necessarily know if I'm going to be home for 3 hours.
It's like the cable company, we'll be there between 6 a.m.
Yes.
and 6 p.m.
And it's a big problem. And same thing if you look at the opportunity with the lockers, right? The lockers, I think one of the biggest barriers for Marta and Lindsay's company right now is the fact that they have to have that double identification. So we're launching it in one of our kind of showcase dispensary that we have to show that on-prem experience. And there's like a lot of potential consumption lounges, but even beyond that, if something like this, you go to downtown Summerlin, to allow somebody like me to just have it like a true Amazon locker style where I order it and the dispensary can drop off all the deliveries. I have 5 p.m. pickup. I can go to my like local, like just on the way home and grab my locker and pick it up because there's a way for me to do the ID. But right now we can't do any of that tech.
Well, and some of the pieces, some of the quote systems that are attempting to do it fall under not compliance at federal, maybe state, California, there's a whole other series of regulation.
Everyone wants national legalization, they actually just don't.
No.
They'd all be shut down immediately. So this is, again, it's amazingly exciting to hear the technology acceptance and the dialogue that we could actually have about these safety issues that our communities can trust, and then the legislators can be assured that it's being done well.
Nevada. My wife and I haven't looked at a response yet.
Nevada really is different. We represent a number of companies that are in multiple states, not cannabis, just like we represent Anheuser-Busch, a bunch of other multinational corporations. And it was actually an Anheuser-Busch guy said to me, the thing that's different about Nevada versus a lot of places that he works, he manages like the 18 Western states. He said most states, when you have an innovative idea, they start at no.
Exactly.
Nevada starts at yes.
Yeah.
And then you hit a wall because you're trying to go too fast.
Yeah.
And you go, oh wait, not yes quite yet.
Yeah.
Let's massage it a little bit.
Yeah.
Nevada generally starts at yes. And that is different than a bunch of states. I mean, we just had an elected official explaining why it took an extra session. That's, I mean,
Oh, they were complaining?
legislature works at a glacial pace. This was running through, and it took one extra session, and he felt the need to like explain that for a minute. And I'm like, you talk to time, it's like on fire. So Nevada does start at yes. It's a nice thing for them to say.
It's the collaboration.
It's really, honestly, it's really truly like, I've never been more impressed or proud when I was from California. I mean, everybody loves California, and I loved California, but when I moved to Nevada, I ran a blockchain company. And same thing, they passed blockchain bills, they've been extremely innovative in this. People don't know this about Nevada, but I fell in love with this state. And people in California that I used to work with in Silicon Valley were always like, okay, sounds good, when you coming back? When you coming back? And I was like, never. First of all, I can do business there. Second of all, there's no sexism, which is awesome. And third of all, I am in a position where I can go and I can talk to any politician. I was out a couple of years ago talking to the legislator, teaching them about blockchain stuff. Like the accessibility and the openness of this state, and then also the like slightly cowboy attitude that's still here, but then the fact that people just get things done is just, it's actually made me proud to be a Nevada. And that is something that I think is incredibly unique and is underrated.
It's really impressive.
California too,
Yeah,
so
sure.
I like to see your company.
I think we built out of that here in the last 2 years and unexpectedly before lockdown, but couldn't have found a better home for this.
But it brings up an interesting question too, is why is Nevada that? Why is it that there is such an openness toward, is it just that those are the history of the state in terms of kind of the wellness that you're talking about, or is there something specific tactically that legislators, advocacy groups are attempting to be able to make that kind of a mandate that we are going to be open to this innovation, open to that technology in ways that other states necessarily adopt or sort of replicate?
I asked that question of my boss when I first moved here. The guy didn't know Ratio. There's a statue of him in the Reno Airport a while back, but he was the longest serving Senate leader in that industry. And I asked him about why is it that we're different like that. He said, because no human being should live here. And he said, really, we have a hustle to give people a reason to come, to create economic activity. But if you think about it, really, no human being is meant to live here. I have a point. You have to create everything you have to create.
True, but I like to read this back to, if you go all the way back, it's like Vegas used to be a haven even for people that were wanted. Like it was a safe space, I think, in a lot of ways. And I think that, there's been, regardless of your political sway, there's been large libertarian population. There's this idea that people should be able to do and create things here. And I think that has become something that is pervasive in the way that the state is run. And I think that there's an openness because of the high tourism and the fact that tourism, the city thrives on it, but in a good, healthy way. I think it means that there's an openness. When I came here, I was accepted with open arms. I didn't feel like I had to prove myself, oh, this person's from California, we've got to prove themselves before they can sit down and talk to people that can get things done or do things. It was that if you could get a seat at the table here. And I think that openness is something that I really appreciated, especially as a woman. And that is something that I think is very unique.
I have a question for the panel, I think in general, maybe legislatively and from the tech side. How does the legislative side see impact from the upcoming federal legalization? For example, you might give out consumption lounge licenses to entities right now that are not involved in the hotels right now or the casinos because they're not allowed to essentially, but in a year and a half, 2 years, if federal legalization comes in play, they can have consumptions inside their places there. How does has anybody thought about protecting the entities that have been granted licenses to kind of protect them so they don't get wiped out by these big organizations that come in? And then I think from the tech side, how do you guys prepare to think about integrating and harmonizing from, is it going to be easier? Is it going to be more of a challenge for your technology to be acknowledged per se effectively within a federal scheme?
I mean, I think, so interestingly enough, in our law, in the state law, you cannot have a dispensary or a lounge or anything within 1,500 feet of a gaming establishment. That's in there because gaming wanted that. So the federal government, if they legalize tomorrow, it would take legislative action to do that. And so I guess the only thing I'll say about that is, I don't know if I'll still be there in the legislature if and when that happens, but there'll have to be a discussion about what that looks like. But for now, even if that's said, it would be allowed under state law. So, I think there would be a pretty healthy discussion about what that would look like, but certainly recognize the investment that the current operators have made. So it'd be a tricky issue, but we're still waiting to see if the federal government's ever really going to get there, and if so, what we want to do as a state. So to be determined.
One quick guess. I have one coffee shop that I will go to when I'm in Amsterdam. It's called Barney's Farm. And that's the place. I get off the plane, I go to Barney's Farm, I have an Irish breakfast. I smoke what's called Laughing Buddha in the United States. 13 weeks of Tiva. So that's what I do. I go there. If Barney's Farm, I don't think Barney's Farm, if they were off strip, I don't think they would get wiped out. I think they would absorb. I think if anything, you may see, because if you say 20 years from now, you think they'll be in the casinos? Yeah, I think 20 years from now, they'll be in the casinos. But I think you'll see the successful ones that have built up a book and a following and an experience. I think you'll just see them get brought in. Yeah. And they'll move into the casino spaces. And then I think you'll still see some of the, if there was one in my neighborhood over in Green Valley, I have a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old at home. Yeah. And so when I'm smoking in my bathroom. Right.
And so there was like in the village pub down on Maple Street, had a consumption room. I would go there.
Right.
So I think there would be a limited market for those as well.
Yes.
So your question is, in my opinion, the most critical issue that is actually facing cannabis technology and today, and I feel like most people aren't paying attention to it. And the reason is because, you know, ultimately, once things become federally legal, at some point it's going to happen, right? There is going to be a big push. We're going to start seeing major companies like pharma. We're going to see the likes of, you know, Amazon, whatever, coming in and looking to participate or even take over and dominate. And I think then what we are seeing is there's going to be, this is no longer a, you know, cannabis conversation around like dispensaries or retailers or businesses now versus the big box businesses. This becomes a time-old conversation around, can local businesses survive in big box business?
Yeah.
And I think that like the reason that I love so much what we're doing and the fact that Nevada is moving quickly and allowing things to happen is it allows for collaboration. My co-founder owns 2 dispensaries. He has every right to be competitive about what we've built and taking it, but he and I both strongly believe that there is a race for the survival of cannabis retail as it is today against big box business, and that it is only through us providing the tools and resources for these dispensaries to become like sustainable and to be able to build reputation and community. That's the only way someone like Barney's name is going to carry over. People have to love what's here first before it becomes federally legal, and it is our responsibility to create technology and to create resources in order for that to be able to get adopted prior to federal legalization, because that's the only way it survives. And we want local business to thrive, right? Like we want local dispensaries, even if they're franchises, whatever it is, they're the ones that are truly going to pay the most taxes, that are going to bring the most to the economy here. We want those businesses to thrive. And so I think that the more that we can band together, like I'm open. I want their companies to come here and to bring them. I want to see SafeArbor have lockers everywhere, because the more that we can integrate and bring that to market, the better chance we have to have local businesses continue on once it gets federally legal.
Yeah, and also bringing that model language from this bill, from what we're able to do to put technology into the rollout of how the licenses look, and being able to provide that to other states that are in the same process, New York and New Jersey, all pushing east.
Illinois, yeah.
So I'll just say one final question relating to that. How do we go about putting it into operators' hands without regulation? That conversation with Legislature Commission, you know, you still sort of a compliance initiative and have that in operation, or is it really drilling down on the pricing models for, you know, operators such as yourselves, ancillary operators, to the technologies, or is it really putting it so that it's affordable, or having these conversations early on with them? How do you make sure that anything that you do, whether it's in the hospitality industry, whether it's in you know, direct ancillary services or technology, how do you make sure that those people can access it, those smaller operators can come?
Well, I think there's a real opportunity with the social equity initiatives in place here in Nevada to give those awarded licenses direct access to this technology. Maybe in that way they have a line to innovation that would give them an edge. So I know there's groups like ours and Cannect that they're really dedicated to providing infrastructure technology that will give social equity applicants a chance against larger scale and consolidated MSOs.
I think the other big thing is going to be like 2 major factors that we consider. One is, you know, what are the models that are going to be sustainable for a mom and pop shop to be able to operate like one of the big multi-state operators, right? Or even against a Walgreens someday. And that's going to be, you know, a model that is going to create efficiency and speed so that they can handle and run the operation. So automation is huge. And I think that cannabis tech is a great place. Retail tech in general is starting to like attack some of these areas, but because cannabis tech is so open, that we get to do. We're doing some really cool stuff about automation. We know a lot of other people that are on the supply chain side of things, so there's a lot to be had there. And so I think the important thing around that is making sure that we continue to have the support. Like, for example, we are limited, we're limited with the ID thing, for example. If there's a way that we can work with you guys, push something through, that'll open so many doors for us to push things out quickly and make it affordable for those companies that they don't have to have a security, another resource. It's just standing there checking the IDs. I mean, then you're down on more resource that saves the dispensaries money, the mom and pop shops have a better chance to survive. But I think the other big thing there is looking at models from other industries of how those things can be paid for. So our model, for example, is utility-based and the cost are passed on to the customer. So the dispensaries actually don't pay. And that's very affordable. You go Uber, DoorDash, you have fees that are associated. For express orders, we have $1. For delivery, we had $3. Nobody looks like any other way about it. And the dispensaries are able to have this type of technology you would find with big box retailers at the ability at their fingertips, and that they're not hovering over costs.
Yeah, likewise, we worked out a hardware lease model, so dispensaries don't have an upfront cost, the machine can pay for itself by the increase in revenue it generates. And so that's sort of the business model, I think, to where we can put this in the hands of operators without having a real tech-heavy operational cost to put this innovative stack in place from the get-go.
Our consulting services, concepting as well too, keeping it affordable for social equity applicants is huge. A lot of the times getting good consulting or getting good consultants, their barrier of entry is so high most of the time they can't afford things. So we have specifically social equity programs in place to help out with people that are specifically going towards social equity licenses, and we assist them in ways that they need to be assisted, but they can't approach a large company that's very well funded the same way you do. Somebody that's using their father's retirement money to start a cannabis business. It's two completely different things. So we pride ourselves on giving the same quality of service towards social equity applicants as we would our large clients as well too. So leveling the playing field out.
Yeah, like two very different perspectives, but as the industry is going to mature and consolidate, it's inevitable it's going to rely on their competence to have access to these flat-scale platforms in order to be able to scale customer acquisition and competitive analysis. And so there's that balance between having access and making it easy to put in place.
And ensuring that any of the compliance barriers are both keeping people safe, but also making it that it's not blocking smaller businesses from being able to operate, right? And I think we're getting, reasonably close. The barriers are becoming less and less as we move forward, and really just to see where it goes.
Does anyone else have any questions tonight? Otherwise, I'll say I think we learned a lot tonight, which means everyone should move into that. And is that yes, the wealth of resources and information that this panel provides, and the audience here has been immense, and we're really grateful to have you here and share this with us. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, awesome.